In the ever-shifting world of the British monarchy, fresh reports have left royal watchers stunned. Prince William, after private talks with King Charles, is said to have backed a temporary step back for Queen Camilla from Buckingham Palace life, while elevating Princess and handing key duties to Princess Catherine. The claims are spreading fast. Before we begin, subscribe to Rudges Talking for the latest royal family news. Alright, let's settle in and really unpack this one, because the stories circulating right now are the kind that keep people talking for weeks. We're dealing with reports, and I want to stress that word, reports, claiming that Prince William has made a set of decisions that, if accurate, would represent one of the more notable internal adjustments inside the royal household in recent years. According to these accounts, after consulting with his father, King Charles, William supported a temporary removal of Queen Camilla from day-to-day life and operations connected to Buckingham Palace. At the same time, he is said to have moved to restore a more visible and prominent role for Princess Anne, while also positioning Princess Catherine to take on responsibilities that had previously been associated with Camilla. Now, before we go any further, let's be clear about the nature of what we're discussing. These are not official palace statements. Buckingham Palace has not confirmed any such arrangement. What we have is a wave of claims coming through certain royal commentary channels and social media discussions. Still, the consistency of the narrative across different sources is what has people paying attention. So today we're going to walk through the claims carefully, look at the context that makes them plausible to some observers, examine the relationships involved, and consider what it would mean if even part of this turns out to be true. Let's start with the core claim. Prince William is described as having supported a temporary stepping back for Queen Camilla from Buckingham Palace. Not a permanent exile, not a stripping of titles, but a temporary removal from the physical and operational center of the monarchy's London base. The timing is interesting because we already know, from confirmed reporting earlier this year, that King Charles and Queen Camilla have decided they will not move into Buckingham Palace once the massive renovation project is finished. They intend to remain at Clarence House. That decision was framed publicly as a practical and modern choice, allowing greater public access to the palace and reflecting the couple's preference for their longtime London home. But the newer claims go further. They suggest William has taken an active role in reinforcing a separation between Camilla and the palace's daily machinery. Why would that matter? Buckingham Palace is more than a residence. Even when the sovereign does not live there full-time, it remains the symbolic and administrative heart of the monarchy. Staff, correspondence, certain ceremonial preparations, and the broader institutional identity still revolve around it. A temporary removal, even if logistical rather than punitive, would send a signal. It would suggest a deliberate effort to reshape the working environment around the next generation. The reports link this move to William's consultations with King Charles. That detail is important. It implies the king is either supportive or at least not opposing the direction. Given Charles's health challenges in recent years and the gradual transfer of more responsibilities to William, it is not hard to imagine the Prince of Wales taking a stronger hand in household management. William has long been described as methodical, protective of the institution's reputation, and focused on streamlining the monarchy for the future. If these reports have any foundation, this would fit the pattern of a future king already beginning to shape the environment he will eventually inherit. Now let's turn to the second major element, the restoration of Princess Anne's honor and a more prominent royal role. Princess Anne has always occupied a unique position. She is the hardest working royal by many measures, the one who carries the highest number of engagements year after year, and the one who has never sought the spotlight in the same way others have. Yet for periods she has operated somewhat outside the central narrative that has focused so heavily on the king and queen and on William and Catherine. The idea that William is deliberately bringing her back into a more visible and influential position is intriguing. What would that look like in practice? It could mean more high-profile joint engagements, a greater formal role in certain charities or military associations, or simply a more consistent presence in the core group of working royals who represent the family at major national moments. And has long been respected inside the family for her no-nonsense approach and a deep understanding of duty. Elevating her would also serve as a quiet statement about continuity and institutional memory. She bridges the eras of Queen Elizabeth II and the current reign. Bringing her closer to the center would reassure traditionalists while giving William a trusted, experienced ally who is not part of the Camilla orbit. Then there is the third piece, positioning Princess Catherine to take on responsibilities previously associated with Camilla. This is the part that feels most forward-looking. Catherine has spent the last couple of years carefully rebuilding her public role after her own health challenges. Her return has been gradual, deliberate, and widely welcomed. If the reports are correct, William is now accelerating that process by transferring certain patronages, representational duties, or ceremonial functions that Camilla had carried. Think about what those responsibilities might include. Camilla has been involved in literacy, domestic violence awareness, osteoporosis, and a range of arts and cultural organizations. Some of those could naturally shift toward Catherine, whose own portfolio already covers early childhood, mental health, and addiction. But the report suggests something broader, not just individual causes, but a more general elevation of Catherine as the senior female royal presence in certain settings that Camilla had previously occupied. In practical terms, that could mean Catherine taking the lead at specific state occasions, hosting more events at Windsor or Kensington, or simply being the face the public sees more often in the roles that sit just below the Queen's. The combination of these three moves, Camilla stepping back from the palace and stepping forward, and Catherine absorbing certain duties, paints a picture of deliberate generational and structural adjustment. It is the kind of quiet rebalancing that monarchies have always done, usually without public fanfare. The fact that it is being discussed so openly now says as much about the current media environment as it does about the palace itself. Let's spend some time on the relationships, because none of this happens in a vacuum. The dynamic between William and Camilla has been the subject of speculation for years. Publicly, they have always been correct and cordial. Privately, observers have long noted that William's primary loyalty is to the memory of his mother and to the future of his own family. Camilla's path to becoming queen was never straightforward in the eyes of the public, and while acceptance has grown significantly, residual sensitivities remain. Any move that appears to reduce her operational footprint will inevitably be read through that historical lens, whether the intention is personal or purely institutional. Princess Anne's position is different. She has maintained a professional and pragmatic relationship with Camilla. There have been moments of visible mutual respect. At the same time, Anne has never been shy about prioritizing the long-term health of the institution over individual preferences. If she is being given a more prominent role, it is unlikely to be framed as a slight against Camilla. It would more likely be presented as recognition of Anne's decades of service and her unique ability to represent continuity. Catherine's situation is the most carefully watched. Every expansion of her role is scrutinized for signs of how the next chapter of the monarchy is being written. The idea that she would absorb responsibilities previously held by Camilla fits a broader pattern of preparing the future queen consort. It also aligns with the practical reality that Catherine is younger, has young children who will one day be central to the family, and is widely seen as a bridge to a more modern public image. Now, let's consider the possible motivations behind such decisions, assuming the reports contain a kernel of truth. One explanation is simple institutional housekeeping. The monarchy is smaller than it once was. The number of full-time working royals is limited. Efficiency matters. Placing Catherine more centrally and drawing on Anne's experience while adjusting Camilla's day-to-day footprint could be viewed as a rational allocation of resources, especially while the king continues to manage his health. Another explanation is about signaling. Every public and semi-public decision by the Prince of Wales is read as a statement about the kind of king he intends to be. A move that strengthens the position of his wife and his aunt while creating clearer boundaries around the current queen consort's operational role would tell the public and the household that the future is being actively prepared. It would also suggest that William is willing to make uncomfortable adjustments when he believes they serve the long-term stability of the crown. There is also the question of Buckingham Palace itself. The decision that Charles and Camilla will not live there after the renovations is already public. Framing a further temporary removal of Camilla from the palace's working life could be an extension of that same philosophy, treating the building more as a national asset and less as a private royal residence. In that light, the move would be less about Camilla personally and more about a broader vision for how the monarchy presents itself in the 21st century. Of course, we have to address the skepticism. Royal reporting of this kind has a long history of exaggeration. Stories that begin as whispers about staffing changes or diary adjustments can grow into dramatic narratives of palace coups. It is entirely possible that what is being described as a temporary removal is, in reality, a practical decision about living arrangements and office space, amplified by commentators who specialize in conflict. The same could be true of the claims about Anne and Catherine. Elevating experienced working royals and preparing the future queen is ordinary institutional behavior. The language of stunned reactions and restored honor may simply be the vocabulary of attention-driven coverage. Still, the persistence of these particular claims is worth noting. They have appeared across multiple channels in recent days, often with overlapping details. That does not make them true, but it does mean the story has enough traction to shape public conversation. And once a narrative takes hold in the royal watching community, it can influence how subsequent events are interpreted. Every future engagement list, every photograph of who stands where at a ceremonial event, every statement about roles and responsibilities will now be examined through this lens. Let's think about the potential consequences if the reports are largely accurate. For Queen Camilla, a reduced presence at Buckingham Palace and a transfer of some duties would represent a significant adjustment at a stage in life when most people are slowing down rather than renegotiating their public role. She has worked hard to build a position of respect, and any perception that her influence is being deliberately curtailed would be painful, even if the official framing remains polite and practical. For Princess Anne, a more prominent role would be a form of recognition that many of her admirers feel is overdue. It would also give the monarchy an additional senior figure who commands respect across different generations and political perspectives. Anne's style is not glamorous, but it is dependable, and dependability is a scarce and valuable commodity. For Princess Catherine, absorbing additional responsibilities would accelerate her transition into the role she will eventually hold. It would also place greater pressure on her time and energy, something the palace has been careful about since her recovery. The challenge would be to expand her portfolio without overloading her or creating the impression that she's being used to eclipse others. And for Prince William, the risks are reputational. Any move that appears to diminish the current queen consort risks being portrayed as cold or overly ambitious. The success of such a strategy would depend entirely on how it is executed, whether it is handled with discretion and mutual respect, or whether it becomes a source of visible tension. William has generally been skilled at managing optics. If he is indeed driving these changes, he will be acutely aware that the way the story is told matters almost as much as the decisions themselves. There's also the question of King Charles's position. The reports say William consulted him and received support. That detail, if true, is crucial. It suggests the changes are happening with the sovereign's blessing rather than against his wishes. Charles has always been a pragmatist about the monarchy's survival. If he believes these adjustments strengthen the institution for the future, he may well accept short-term discomfort. At the same time, Charles and Camilla have been a genuine partnership for many years. Any arrangement that reduces a role would require careful emotional management inside the family. Looking further ahead, these reported moves raise larger questions about the shape of the monarchy under William. Will it be smaller, more tightly focused on the core nuclear family of the future king, with experienced relatives like and in supporting but clearly defined roles? Will the distinction between the reigning sovereign's household and the heir's household become sharper? Will the public role of the queen consort be recalibrated with each generation? These are the kinds of structural questions that rarely get answered in a single announcement, but which reveal themselves through a series of smaller decisions over time. It is also worth considering the public mood. Support for the monarchy remains solid in many parts of the country, but it is not unconditional. Younger generations in particular tend to judge the institution by its relevance and its values. A narrative in which William is seen to be protecting the long-term health of the crown, elevating capable women within the family, and preparing his own wife for future responsibilities may play well with that audience. Conversely, any story that can be framed as internal power struggles or the marginalization of an older woman risks feeding cynicism. The palace's challenge, as always, is to control the framing before others do it for them. Let's pause and consider alternative explanations that do not require us to accept the most dramatic version of the reports. It is possible that Camilla's reduced presence at Buckingham Palace is simply the logical extension of the already announced decision not to live there. It is possible that Princess Anne's increased visibility is a natural result of her continued high work rate and the limited number of available senior royals. It is possible that Catherine is taking on more duties because she is ready and because the diary requires it. In other words, what is being presented as a coordinated strategy by William may in fact be a set of independent, practical adjustments that commentators have woven into a single dramatic storyline. That possibility should not be dismissed. Royal coverage has a tendency to impose narrative order on what is often messier and more mundane institutional life. At the same time, the fact that these particular elements, Camilla, Anne, and Catherine, are being linked together so consistently suggests that something is being noticed. Staff movements, diary changes, and seating arrangements are the small indicators that royal journalists watch carefully. When several of them appear to point in the same direction, speculation follows. As we move through the coming weeks and months, the test will be observable reality. Will Camilla's public engagements show a noticeable shift away from palace-centered activity? Will Princess Anne appear more frequently in the core group at major national events? Will Catherine's portfolio expand in ways that clearly overlap with Camilla's previous responsibilities? Those are the concrete measures that will either lend weight to the current reports or gradually undercut them. In the meantime, the conversation itself is revealing. It shows how closely the public and the media are watching the transition from one generation of the monarchy to the next. It shows the residual sensitivity around Camilla's position, even after years of growing acceptance. It shows the enduring respect for Princess Anne's brand of quiet competence. And it shows the high expectations placed on Catherine as she steps more fully into a future role. Whatever the precise truth behind the latest claims, they have already succeeded in focusing attention on the internal architecture of the royal household. That architecture is never static. It shifts with health, with age, with public expectation, and with the priorities of the people who will one day sit on the throne. Prince William is clearly in the process of defining those priorities. Whether the current reports capture that process accurately or simply exaggerate ordinary adjustments, they have given us a useful opportunity to examine the forces shaping the monarchy at this moment. The story will continue to develop. New details will emerge, some confirming parts of the narrative, others complicating it. Official silence from the palace is likely to continue. The institution rarely comments on internal family and household matters of this kind. In the absence of confirmation or denial, the speculation will fill the space. That is the environment in which modern royal coverage operates. For those who follow these matters closely, the responsible approach is to hold the claims lightly, watch the public record, and resist the urge to treat every dramatic headline as established fact. At the same time, it would be naive to ignore the direction of travel that many of these reports describe. The monarchy under William is likely to look different from the monarchy under Charles, just as Charles's reign has differed from his mother's. The adjustments may be gradual and carefully managed, but they are real. In the end, the central characters in this episode, William, Camilla, Anne, and Catherine, are all navigating the same fundamental challenge: how to sustain an ancient institution in a rapidly changing society while managing the very human relationships that exist inside any family. The reports we have been discussing claim that William has chosen a particular set of answers to that challenge. Whether those answers prove lasting, or whether they are revised by events still to come, remains to be seen. What is already clear is that the conversation about the future shape of the royal family has entered a new phase. The focus is no longer only on survival or on recovering from recent difficulties. It is on design, on who stands where, who carries which responsibilities, and how the next era will be structured. That conversation is likely to continue for some time, and the latest wave of reports has simply made its stakes more visible. Thank you for spending this hour with the subject. The royal story never stands still, and neither does the public's fascination with it. We will keep watching the developments, measuring the claims against the evidence, and trying to understand what they tell us about the institution that still occupies such a distinctive place in national life.